You just don't see wars like this anymore in the NFL. You might get CD Lamb and Jalen Ramsey going at each other in a football game. And boy, oh boy, that makes me excited. Let's talk about that and much more about the Cowboys offense versus the Dolphins defense. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Prime Time. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network with a lot more content coming your way. Make sure that you check out adcsports.com/Dallas. And as always, do me a favor and hit the like button for me if you enjoy the show. It is a great night to talk some Cowboys football, and I am getting excited. I am starting to feel the vibes about this upcoming showdown against the Miami Dolphins, and I wanted to start diving into it a little bit tonight. We usually start our preview content here on Primetime on Wednesdays and Tuesdays sometimes, but now we waited until Wednesday with all of the playoff chaos that we wanted to go over yesterday. But I'm getting excited about it because the Dolphins are a good football team. Let me tell you that right now. People like to criticize them for a very similar reason that they criticize the Dallas Cowboys, and that is they haven't beaten a winning team in the NFL. I know that the Cowboys already have done so, but similar storylines going into Week 16. The Dolphins have been pretty good this year. You look at the stats, and they are actually better than the Cowboys in many of the stats. You look at DVOA, they're better there. You look at rushing EPA and dropback EPA, and they're better in pretty much just about every stat that you can think of. And they scored 70 on the Broncos. However, they faced the Chiefs, lost to the Chiefs, allowed 2 touchdowns in the first half offensively, and then another one defensively. They allowed over 40 points against the Buffalo Bills, and they allowed over 30 to the Eagles. Both of games they lost to. So this is a team that has some question marks around them, but man, they've got some players. And one of them particularly stands out to me for this matchup, and that is Jalen Ramsey going up potentially against CD Lamb, number 88 for the Cowboys. I've said this before this season, and I'll say it again. You just don't get battles like this anymore in the NFL when a top wide receiver is likely to go against a top cornerback, and where you're likely to see them throughout the entire game. Because nowadays, man coverage is more rare in the NFL. The highest teams, the teams that play the highest man coverage rates in the league are usually at around 50%. If you play 50% man coverage in this league, you're out of your goddamn mind. And people call you a mad scientist. And, the Cowboys are at around 40-something percent with Dan Quinn, and they are known as a man coverage team. It's just the way it goes in the NFL. And even rarer is when a cornerback shadows the top receiver, when the top receiver goes inside and Ramsey goes with them, or outside. Not Ramsey, but a generic cornerback, right? Not even Jalen, who is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. I think you could still make the argument that he's the best. He's only played 7 games this year, but he has the numbers and the tape to back it up, man. He's really in that conversation even to this day. And even he doesn't do a lot of shadowing. He doesn't do a lot of that. It's an interesting week, however, because just 7 days ago, not 7 days ago, but like last Sunday, he did shadow Garrett Wilson a whole lot with the New York Jets for 55% of the plays, by the way. And as we approach this game, and, it's a big Fangio game, and we'll talk about Fangio as well, but I'm going to be honest with you. I would love, absolutely adore the opportunity to witness Ramsey versus CD on this game. And I would absolutely love it if he shadows CeeDee Lamb. I think it would be one of the best battles that we could get this year. And you know what? They might just do that. They might just do that because the Dolphins might enter this one and be like, oh, I saw what the Bills did last week, excuse me, where they took away the first read for Dak Prescott and they forced him to do a little bit more. And we saw the offense crumble a little bit. That is not to say that Dak Prescott cannot get past the first read, which would be an insane thing to say in his 8th year in the NFL. But maybe it's a good way to challenge one of the best passing offenses this year that struggled last weekend when the Bills did exactly that. So I could see the Dolphins being a little bit aggressive and putting Jalen on Lamb. And I would like to see two things out of that if it does come to it. If it comes to it, and let me just give you some numbers. Jalen Ramsey, number one cornerback in reception rate allowed. So reception out of each target that he gets, he allows only I think it's 19. No, that's not right. 40% reception rate. That's 27 targets, 11 catches. That ranks number one in the NFL among eligible cornerbacks. And he's also number one in NFL passer rating. He's been playing for 7 games, and out of those 7, he has allowed 0 to 1 catch in 4 of those games. He averages, in terms of what he allows, 1.6 catch per game and 22 yards per game. Holy smokes. And he doesn't play a lot of man coverage, as I said, though. But if it comes to CD versus Jalen, there's 2 things that I would love to see out of that. Number one would be Dak moving away from 88 and finding answers elsewhere. I would love to see that just because it would show some maturity for the offense, right? When 88 isn't going, we can still go. I would love to see that on Sunday. There's also a more maybe childlike desire, though, in me, which is I would like to see Dak and CD be like, screw it, we are going to 88 anyways, and them being successful with it. That would be like CD officially unlocking a new level of respect for anybody. If he can go to Miami in Jalen's house and be like, oh, you can shadow me and I'm going to make you pay for it. If it goes to that, man, that's a dream come true, I think, for Cowboys fans. Just seeing CD really adopt that alpha mentality at wide receiver and us getting that memory of CD going at Jalen Ramsey and beating him. I would love to see all that. I'll be honest, however, and say we might not get a lot of it. I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Ramsey does shadow CD for large portions of the game, but for the most part, this is still a big Fangio defense. And if you know Big Fangio and what he does on defense, it's very different to what you might get out of, Wink Martindale or Mike McDonald with the Ravens. You're not going to see a whole lot of man coverage. You're not going to see a lot of blitzes even. They're just going to trust their defensive front. They're going to play deep zones, right? So they're going to basically be like, hey, you're not going deep against us. You're going to have to be patient. And we talk a lot about too high looks when we discuss Big Fangio because he does like to get a lot of too high safety looks in there and put that cap to an offensive, attack. But they also do this thing where they rotate heavily post snap. They show too high and rotate into one high. But even when they do that, like the underneath zone, like the safety that plays the underneath zone, that zone is deeper than your usual defensive coverage. And I think that's part of the Big Fangio essence where they are like, you're just not throwing deep against us. You're just not going to be able to do that. And that is going to force the Cowboys passing offense to be more patient and more creative in a way. And I think that's what went wrong against the Bills last weekend, too. Part of what went wrong. We looked at some video on Tuesday when we discussed this, but we were basically alluding to the Cowboys losing the chess match that they played against Sean McDermott and the Bills. And part of it had to do with when the Bills did play too high, didn't seem like the Cowboys had a lot of answers for it. And we saw a lot of stop routes, and we had some nightmares and deja vus to Kellen Moore when he insisted on the stop routes. Now it's going to be a week where even if they're playing you with two deep safeties, man, you're going to have to find a way to attack the middle of the field. You're going to have to find a way to hit a crossing route or something. You're going to have to find a way to push the ball downfield, even if they're not allowing you to do it from a schematic point of view. I love the mentality of taking what they give you, but if that means running stop routes like crazy and failing to get some additional answers, it's going to be a long day again for the Cowboys. Just a long, long day. And man, I'm looking forward to seeing that chess battle between Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott, and Big Fangio. It's not going to be easy at all. It really isn't. And I think the Cowboys lost the chess matchup on Sunday versus the Bills, and I would hate to see them lose it again. And again, if you want to see some clips as to what I mean with the Cowboys losing the chess battle, we went over some of them on Tuesday. But this is a game where the Cowboys are going to have to change things up. And I don't think it's that they were even less aggressive against the Bills. They just weren't timely, or something went wrong with their plan to attack their too high defense. The good thing is they just leave that on Sunday. So maybe they have some very recent answers for what Big Fangio might present on Sunday, and they might be a little bit, they studied for this test. Not exactly the same test, because it's not the same defense that McDermott and Fangio coach, but some of the principles behind them might be very similar. So the Cowboys might come a little bit better prepared to this one. The Bills, as Bruce, the Bills game felt like we had Mike Moore and Kellen Quinn calling plays. And hey, I kind of see where this is coming from. On one hand, you had the Cowboys getting the wrong answer on offense for pretty much a lot of things, including what we're talking about right now. And on defense, I don't remember seeing a loaded box when the Bills were insisting on running the football. Didn't seem like the Cowboys said, you know what, let's try something different. They just kept doing their thing, played a lot of light boxes, and didn't work out. So I understand where Bruce comes from here, and it's what's got to change for Sunday. Because we're not going to talk a lot about the defensive matchup tonight, but boy, Mike McDaniel is going to be on one on Sunday. That's McDaniel and Fangio. I think a lot of people underestimate what McDaniel did there, where he's like, yeah, let's bring in a long-tenured coach here, an experienced defensive coach, and there is not going to be any ego. We're just going to be extremely good play callers and masterminds at what we do. And that's a tough challenge. That's a tough challenge to face if you are the Cowboys. I think overall, from a season perspective, Mike McCarthy has been killing it. I think he has coached his way out of the hot seat. I think if the Cowboys, for one reason or another, lose in the wildcard game, I think McCarthy has a job with the Cowboys in 2024, just keeping it real with what we've seen so far. And with Dan Quinn, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. I think everyone appreciates what Dan Quinn does, and I think he's still one of the best defensive play callers right now in the NFL. But we also want to see some answers to the run defense, which right now is 32nd, dead last in the NFL in rush defensive success rate. So at the very least, we got to say mixed bag. Is it talent-wise? Is it coaching-wise or scheme-wise? But we got to be just willing to admit that the defense is not the best defense in the NFL like we thought it might be earlier in the year. So we'll see what happens there. Toxic Tom says, Bills were playing chess. Dallas was playing checkers, and he never stood a chance with that game plan. And I agree with it. I've come to accept it. I come to accept that the Cowboys were just not ready coaching-wise for that Bills game. The problem is if you go to Miami and you face Big Fangio and you face Mike McDaniel and you're not ready for that one either, yikes. That's where That's where, as Cowboys fans, we're just going to have to be like, people might have been right about the Cowboys showing up against lesser opponents, even though they beat the Eagles by 20, who then lost to the Seahawks as well. So just saying, like, man, if they show, and I'm not even talking about the final scoreboard being like 24-21 or something like that. If it is a close game, then there's a lot that we'll need to consider. But if it's a game that gets away from the Cowboys in the first half and then they just don't do anything to be back on it in it by the second half, it's gonna be the game that maybe you're like, oh boy, maybe people were right all along, like haters were right. And it's one that might really take a hit on your playoff hopes. More than playoff hopes, like hopes for playoff success. Because the Cowboys are in the postseason already. And this is a game that, as we explained last night, still gives you some leeway in the NFC East picture. Like if you lose this one, you still need one more loss from the Eagles to still win the NFC East. So standing wise, it might be the least important game, but from a, you know, from a measuring stick standpoint, doesn't get better than this. Doesn't get better than this. How do you respond? How do you look on the road against a coaching staff that is really freaking good and that's gonna have some answers for you? So we'll see how that all that goes, man. It's not gonna be easy. And then the battle extends itself not only from the perimeter when we're talking about CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Ramsey and a solid group of cornerbacks that they've got, but man, the trenches, boy, the trenches is going to be a struggle as well on this game. Let me tell you why. Here's how you look at the Dolphins, man. You go look at the Dolphins and you're like, oh man, Bradley Chubb is good. You know what he did last weekend? Bradley Chubb, who's one of their edge rushers, had 3 sacks against the New York Jets. And I know it's the Jets, but still, he added 2 forced fumbles. And then on top of that, he had 2 tackles for a loss. Bradley Chubb has really become one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He is 11th in pressures, total pressures, talking about that. He is top 10 in pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus. And he has become a nightmare. He's one of the biggest reasons the Dolphins are second in the NFL in sack rate. They have the second highest sack rate in the entire league. But you watch tape and you look at the numbers and everything, and you're like, well, Bradley Chubb only plays on the right side of the defense. So that means he's going to go up against Tyron Smith. Now, not saying that Tyron Smith is invincible or that he's not going to be beaten. He might get beaten in this game at least once. I would expect him to, because Bradley Chubb really has been that good. He deserves that level of respect. But he's likely not going to break the game from the right side, right? The Cowboys might still be okay just leaving him on an island and focusing on other mismatches across the offensive line. The problem is this kid called Andrew Van Ginkel, AVG for the Dolphins, who is also playing like one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. If you look at PFF grades, they are both in the top 10 edge rushers this season. And the tape backs it up and the numbers back it up. He is 40th in pressures, which is not bad at all, considering he rotates and stuff. He's top 15 in pass rush win rate, 2 per PFF. And that is the guy that's likely going to see the most playing time against Terrence Steele. And you're looking at the game and you're like, oh, the tackles are going to be challenged. And it's not like it's very easy to slide protect and help Terrence Steele in every single play, because this is where it gets the nastiest. Christian Wilkins is their defensive tackle. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Christian Wilkins, former Clemson Tiger. Don't worry, I'm not going to be rooting for him on Sunday. But that guy is 3rd in sacks among defensive tackles. That guy is basically taking advantage of the help that he has on the edges and just creating chaos inside. And I like Tyler Viotish, I think he's good. I think he's very solid. I think solid is a word, center. But we've also seen him struggle in some of these one-on-one situations. So much so that we saw the Buffalo Bills try to basically exploit that mismatch. This is one of the plays that we saw yesterday from the Bills game. That is a design that, yeah, people focused on the guy that was about to make the interception, but that was a design where they try to get Ed Oliver one-on-one against Tyler Viotic. And you know what? It worked. It absolutely worked. So that's one of the matchups that, man, I'm a little bit worried about. If you're worried about Bradley Schuff and you're worried about Andrew Van Ginkel on each side of the offensive line, and you also get that potential mismatch at center with Christian Wilkins, could be an issue. Now, that's just part of the problem. Do you guys remember Zach Martin was hurt against Buffalo and the Cowboys had to play TJ Voss and he didn't practice? Martin didn't on Wednesday. I'm a little bit concerned about that too. I am a little bit concerned about that because I look at this game and I'm like, that's a good defensive line. And you know what? One of the things that I told you last night was I didn't even feel like the offensive line was bullied by the Bills defensive line. I think a lot of the pressures were a result of what the Bills were doing in coverage and a result of maybe Dak Prescott at one point being a little bit too impatient. And I like Dak Prescott, you know that, but it wasn't the best game from him. I think the missed shot to Brandon Cooks has been overly hated on. That was far from being one of the concerns out of that game. It was more about the pocket and maybe being a tad too impatient. But man, this game could get ugly in the trenches if the Cowboys are missing Zach Martin, if the Cowboys show up unprepared in terms of their plans to handle the pressure, and they get the pressure even without being too aggressive in terms of blitzing, because Big Fangio just trusts his coverage and he trusts his four-man up front to go after the QB. Now, all that being said, it is true that the Dolphins have faced the easiest schedule in the NFL in terms of the offenses that they've faced. So we might see some good response here from the Cowboys, and they could come out ready to go. I think it's going to be a game where they're going to need to be patient against this Dolphins defense. They really are going to have to be that, and Dak is going to have to be a little bit more efficient with his footwork in the pocket and be a little bit more locked in, right? And be like 1, 2, 3, boom. And maybe he's not going to count on CD to be there with if he does get Jalen Ramsey in coverage in a lot of these plays. So it's going to be quite the challenge. It's going to be quite the chess match. And the offensive line in the trenches is going to have to go to war for this offense on Sunday. And that's all without taking into account what the game script could be. Because last week, man, when the Bills went up by 2 possessions and they just started running the football on you, then the Cowboys offense felt all the pressure and they knew they had to throw the football to win, and they knew they had some urgency and stuff, and they kind of crumbled in that sense. Let me tell you something. If it comes to that, if it comes to the Dolphins going up on you with their first 15, which they absolutely nail every single week, they're going to keep running on you. And even more so after what we witnessed on the Buffalo Bills game. I think the Dolphins might go into this one and be like, oh, my division rivals actually just gave me the blueprint. Let me go ahead and do the exact same. And they are going to start running outside, and they're going to start to do all of their motion and their eye candy stuff where Tua and the running back turn to the right and then they flip it to the left. It's a crazy offense. It's a crazy offense to watch. I'm a little bit nervous about it. I'm not going to lie. Going to be a good game. I don't think it's a game that the defense wins, and we'll talk about tomorrow. I think it's a game that the offense could win. Not the defense, though. I'm not as excited about the defense going up against Mike McDaniel and company. Not going to be pretty in terms of like just not going to be a blowout win by the Cowboys, I think. It could be very tough. It could be a very tough game. and very close throughout. But I think if the Cowboys win this one, it's going to be because of the matchup that we were discussing tonight. And it's not going to be exactly because of a matchup that he can exploit. It's likely just going to be a matchup of, man, we're both pretty evenly matched and we're going to go at it all game long. Let's see what you guys have to say, though. Troy says Queen needs to solve this his Micah issue or his time is up, says Troy Dudley. Man, Troy, we cannot keep having this conversation every single night. But, man, this is just a question that I would give you. What Micah issue? Because this is what is really going on with Micah Parsons. Leads the NFL in pressures, remains one of the most double-teamed edge rushers in the NFL, and in spite of that, he still leads the league in pressures. He still has one of the highest pass rush win rates in the NFL, second highest per PFF. You do not have a Micah Parsons issue. I know the Cowboys got whooped in the run game, but we got to get it through our heads. Micah Parsons is one of the league's best pass rushers, and that's what he should be doing. Shouldn't be playing off-ball linebacker just because of some weird fantasy of this guy can do it all. Let's go ahead and have him do it all, when I would much rather have him be, the best at the most valuable position on defense that he can get on the NFL. What's up, Big Benny? Thank you for joining the show. I appreciate you being here. We've also got Katharina. After last weekend's game with the Bills, the Cowboys are coming prepared, trust and believe. Justin says it's our game of the year. We need a big road win, confidence booster. Man, they really do need it. I wrote an article for ADC Sports calling this a blessing in disguise kind of game. I stand by that, man. I stand by that in the sense that it is a nightmare to think about it. But, man, if the Cowboys can squash away what happened in Buffalo in a week and they can go to a tough opponent that is going to be in the playoffs on the other side of the NFL, but they're going to be in the playoffs, and you can beat them and you can stop their run and you can do all that, bro, boom. That's really one of the biggest things that you can get here over the last 3 weeks of the season. That confidence booster, as Justin here calls it. I sometimes think that we, as fans, overestimate like what confidence is and what momentum is and all that. But, man, the Cowboys do need that boost. Because if you go, man, because here's the thing, too. If you go to Miami and you don't win that game and you struggle in that game similarly to what you did in Buffalo, you're not getting that opportunity at a confidence booster for the rest of the year. Because, sure, you could beat the Lions, but you're going to do that at AT&T Stadium. And maybe you go to Washington and that's a road game. But if you beat the Commanders, even if you blow them out, whose confidence is that going to raise, right? It's not the same to talk about the Washington Commanders than to talk about the Miami Dolphins in 2023. It is just not the same. Toxic says, before we move on here, Toxic says, Mo, is Dan Quinn's Dallas defensive design just not able to stop the run? Seems like we keep having these issues, especially as the season progresses. I'm not sure if it's partly a scheme, right? Because the Cowboys like to do man coverage. They like to do all that. And more than scheme, just like the personnel identity that the Cowboys have installed in Dallas, which has been pretty effective, just looking at the overall numbers, is to be quick, is to be agile. John Owning made a great point on Twitter, and I do think it is pretty spot on. We like to, and I include myself in this category, we like to be super concerned about linebackers being undersized. We like to talk about all that. And it might be more of a defensive tackle issue too, where you have these undersized defensive linemen as well, and they're not demanding doubles other than Ozo Digisuwa. And the linebackers get a very bad picture to work with because instead of having those defensive linemen occupy two linemen up front, they're climbing to the second level and they're eliminating the linebackers right away. John Owning made that a point on Twitter. And, bro, you watch the tape and it is pretty evident that that is going on in Dallas when you watch this Cowboys defense be challenged. So this is a situation where it's like, not only how could I get better at defensive tackle, but how could I get more answers schematically? And maybe that comes through loading the box a little bit more if somebody wants to challenge you the way that Dan Quinn was challenged by the Buffalo Bills. Or maybe that comes from saying, maybe, you know what? Maybe instead of removing Jaron Kears from the box and playing him somewhere that he's not comfortable at, maybe I'm just going to keep him at the box. And I think that was a very questionable decision there by Dan Quinn, if I'm being honest with you. To be fair, though, Juan J. Thomas did have 3 missed tackles versus the run. So you could also see his point a little bit about maybe trusting Jaron a little bit more in that role. I'm not sure. But, man, it's definitely a scheme that has paid off in several ways, like the pass defense, especially when they are ahead and they can rush the passer. It's as good as it gets, probably. Even more so in a world where you still have Trayvon Diggs. But hopefully we get Jonathan Hankins back for this one. That would help. I think that would help the linebackers, even though they're not a team that is going to run it up the gut. They're going to take it outside. But again, we get to the same conversation as the John Owning tweet, where it's like, it's not only about getting to the outside, it's about keeping offensive linemen from climbing to the second level. And that happens through good defensive tackles, if we are being honest here. All that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Hankins might not play on Sunday. He might not play. In fact, I would expect him not to play because Mike McCarthy used the same vocabulary that he did last week to describe his status for the week. And that was, he's hard-pressed to go against the Dolphins. And he said that last week, didn't play, really close to playing. So right now, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't sound like Jonathan Hankins is playing on Sunday. That's an issue. That really is an issue. I saw a tweet from Not To Be Tried also on Twitter. You might know him. If you're on Cowboys Twitter, you should know him. Not To Be Tried, man. I trust his stuff. I trust his info. Doesn't have like the super insider profile, right? He's in like an NFL Network insider or anything like that. But I'm just saying, man, that's somebody you want to trust. And he suggested on Twitter that Masa Smith is playing at 280 pounds. I don't like that. I thought he was playing at like 320, 337, something like that. He might be playing at 280, man, and we might not know a lot about that. Why? I would like to know. But yeah, man, those defensive tackles are going to be challenged on Sunday yet again. Let's see here. Leon L., thank you, man. He says, if it looks like we can stop them, then I'm all out blitzing every down. And that might be the way for this game, by the way. That might be the way, because you look at that offensive line, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow. But you look at that offensive line, they've got some holes. They for sure have some holes. They've got problems at left guard. They've got problems at center. But listen, here's the big news of the day. None of the 5 starting offensive linemen for the Dolphins were at practice on Wednesday. None of the 5. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be banged up at every position, but it does raise some concern about that unit. They've got Teron Armstead at left tackle, play the whole game. They've got Eichenberg at center, play the whole game last week. They've got Auden at left guard, who has struggled and he's also a little bit banged up. And then right guard and right tackle are also positions where they're not like they have this super offensive lineman that we should be afraid of. So this is a game where you could see Dan Quinn being like, yep, we'll have some pressure this time and we're going to go at you. But then again, Tua gets rid of the football pretty freaking quickly. Fastest in the NFL in time to throw, by the way. So it's going to be an issue. It's going to take a full effort. Not even the Cowboys pass rush is going to be super effective if Tua is just getting rid of the football at blazing speed and just exploiting the coverage. Because when you talk about Tua getting rid of the ball quickly, it's different than other teams. Because remember, these boys have Tyreek Hill and they've had Jalen Waddle on their wide receiver rooms. So that means they're not throwing super quickly, but throwing like a 3-yard hitch or like a glance route. They're throwing sometimes even 10 yards deep, even though Tua is firing quickly, because Tyreek travels at a different speed, but Jalen Waddle also travels at a different speed. Even the running backs, when they run flats and when they run swing routes and screen routes, they're just fast. They're just fast across the board. Across the board, they're fast. Let's see here. Justin says, Massey is not the problem. I didn't see Buffalo get many yards up the middle. They gashed us on the sides. I don't think Massey was great versus the run against the Bills. Here's what I would say, Justin, though. Here's what I would say to that. And it relates to what I just said earlier on the show. If you play defensive tackle and you're talking about stopping the run, your job is not only to give up few yards up the middle. It's about you occupying linemen for the linebackers to have a clear path to the running back, or to have a clear read as to where they should go, what gap they should take, where's the tackle to be made. And it's not only about stuffing the run up the middle. It's about being a threat to offensive linemen who are double teaming you. And then double teams, how they work, it's like one of the players covers the guy and then the other initiates some contact, gets them out of position. And then once that job is done, they climb to the second level. They're not supposed to do it very quickly because they're supposed to take care of the block first and then get to the second level. But if you're being pushed around by one guy, then they're not gonna block you for one count and then go up to the second level. They're just gonna be like tap and then go get you at the second level if you're the linebacker. And we saw some of that too versus the Bills. Toxic Tom says, Mo, have you ever in your entire life seen Dallas have a good run defense? I don't think so. Not like for an entire season. That's one of the underrated aspects of the Cowboys' history, I believe. Modern history is we haven't seen a lot of good defenses in this team's history since the Tony Romo days, even. We have not seen a lot of them, right? This is one of the best. This is actually, I would say, the best defense of the Cowboys? Like, at least from the Tony Romo days on, it's probably the best defense, the Dan Quinn one. You know, taking into account, like, not just this year, but the two before that, 2021, 2022, 2023, but not run-wise, just pass-wise. 2007 Dallas defense was nasty, says Toxic. That's probably right. It's probably right up with it. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. Tomorrow, we're going to talk some more about the Cowboys defense actually going up against this Dolphins offense. We'll talk about some keys to the game, and we'll close it out with the prediction. It is already Thursday, the 20th in December. This year is about to go to the past, man. This year is about to be gone, and it's going to be 2024 in the blink of an eye. Hit the like button for me. Enjoy the night, and I will see you tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.